In a very deep village of Afar, there lived a woman named Yemi. She was a very beautiful woman and a food seller. Her cooking was the best in the whole village. No other person can compete with her. Everyone called her Yemi the food goddess, because her food was so tasty that people came from all over the village, even from the town nearby, to eat it. Very early in the morning, every day, Yemi would set up her store and cook different kinds of dishes. And everyone will come and patronize her, because they loved to eat her food. She was a very kind woman and the villagers liked her a lot. She had a very little daughter named Ella. She loves Ella so much and she did everything to make her happy. But Yemi life wasn't always easy. When she was pregnant with Ella, something very sad happened. Kunal, Yemi's husband, passed away. Yemi was left alone to take care of Ella all by herself. Even with that, Yemi had no one to help her. But she didn't give up. She worked very hard every single day to cook and sell food, so she could take care of Ella. She loved her daughter more than anything in the world. The villagers always saw how hardworking Yemi is and they admired her. The truth is that, despite her success, life was not easy for her, but she never complained. She smiled and took care of Ella, the best she could. Yemi and Ella were always together, like best friends. They lived happily in the village and nothing could break the love they shared. One day, something terrible happened in Afar village. A young man, strong and healthy, came to Yemi food store. He was well known in the village and was liked by many others. He loved Yemi food. After Yemi served him, he smiled and ate his meal, just like everyone else. But later that day, the young man started to feel sick. His family gathered around him trying to help, but soon he began to vomit blood. Everyone gasped in Afar village, because vomiting blood meant one thing: poison. The young man didn't survive. He passed away, and the village was in shock. The news spread quickly and everyone whispered the same thing. Yemi poisoned him. The villagers were furious. How could someone so loved, someone they trusted, do such a thing? They didn't stop to think. They only wanted to punish her for what they believed she had done. A crowd gathered at the Yemi's stall. They shouted, "Murderer, poisoner." They didn't give Yemi a chance to explain. The anger in their hearts was too strong in their rage. The villagers grabbed stones. They stoned Yemi, until she fell to the ground lifeless. Little Ella was only 10 years old. She watched everything that happened. She cried and cried, but no one listened to her mother. Her only family was gone. Yemi, the kind woman who cooked for everyone, was gone forever, leaving Ella alone in the world. After Yemi's death, Ella was all alone. The villagers couldn't keep her, so they decided to send her to a nearby village where Ella's uncle, Tunde, lived. Uncle Tunde was a very kind-hearted man. When he heard what happened to Yemi, he felt so sad. He welcomed Ella into his home with open arms. Tunde had a family of his own and they treated Ella like she was one of them. Ella was still sad about her mother, but her uncle, Tunde, and his family made sure she never felt alone. They gave her food, a warm bed and lots of love. They always told her, "You are part of this family." Now Ella started to feel better. As time went on, she missed her mother very much, but in her uncle's home, she found some happiness again. She played with her cousins and helped her aunt around the house. Life seemed brighter for little Ella and she slowly began to smile again. Even though the pain of losing her mother was still there. Ella was asking if her uncle was her dad, because she felt like she had a new family. And that made her feel safe and loved. Years passed and Ella grew older. She was now 18. And Uncle Tunde had grown old. He watched Ella grow into a beautiful young woman, but he knew there was something she needed to know. The truth about her mother's death, because it had been kept from her for so long. One day, Tunde called Ella to sit with him. He looked at Ella with sad eyes and said, "Ella, there's something you need to know about your mother's death." Ella listened closely as her uncle began to tell her the story. He explained how a young man had died after eating her mother's food. He told her how the villagers believed Yemi had poisoned him and in their anger, stoned her to death. Ella's heart sank. She had always wondered what happened to her mother, and now hearing the truth, she was filled with sadness and pain. Tears rolled down her cheeks. As she thought about how unfair it all was, for her mother, who was so kind and loved by many, had died in such a terrible way. Uncle Tunde put his hand on her shoulder and said, "Your mother wasn't bad, Ella, it was a terrible misunderstanding." The villagers didn't listen to her. They were blinded by anger. Ella cried, but she was glad to finally know what had happened. Even though the truth was painful, she was thankful her uncle told her. She missed her mother more than ever. But knowing the truth gave her a sense of peace. Not long after Uncle Tunde told him the truth, something very sad happened. Uncle Tunde, who had been so kind and loving to her, passed away. Ella was heartbroken once again. She had lost her mother and now she had lost her uncle too. After the funeral, Ella's cousin sat her down. They told her that they could no longer take care of her. "You are grown up now," they said. "You must find your own way." Ella was shocked and felt completely alone once again with no one else to go to. Ella thought about her mother. She remembered the village of Afar and how her mother had been loved there, before everything went wrong. Maybe, just maybe the villagers had forgiven her mother by now. Ella made a big decision. She packed her things and returned to Afar village. She wanted to start fresh just like her mother had done, before her. Ella thought that if she could cook and sell food, like her mother, the people might accept her again. She hoped they wouldn't remember the terrible past and would see her as Ella, not just the daughter of Yemi. With hope in her heart, Ella arrived in Afar village, ready to start her new life. Ella was full of hope when she set up her food stall in Afar village. Ella woke up very early, just like her mother used to, and cooked delicious meals. She was ready for the villagers to come and smell the tasty food and to fill their hunger. But as the day went by, no one came. Ella waited and waited, but the villagers kept their distance. They whisper to each other, remembering the tragedy that happened so many years ago. They still believed that Ella's mother had poisoned the young man, and because of that they didn't trust Ella food. Day after day, Ella would cook and wait, but no one bought her food. The villagers passed by her stall, but they avoided her store. Ella could feel their fear and doubt, and it made her heart heavy. Even though she was sad and hurt, Ella didn't give up. She kept trying. She cooked the best meal she could, hoping that one day, someone would give her a chance. But each day, the stall remained empty and the food was left untouched. Ella felt hopeless. But deep inside, she still believed that things could change. She held on to that hope and kept going, no matter how lonely it felt. One evening, after another long day of no sales, Ella walked home with tears in her eyes. Her heart was heavy with sadness and her feet dragged along the dusty path. She had tried so hard, but the villagers still refused to buy her food. They whispers about her mother. The pain of being alone weighed on her as she walked down a lonely road. As she was walking, something strange happened. An old woman appeared from the shadows, with hunched back, making her look small, but her eyes were sharp and glowing. Ella had never seen this woman before, but there was something unsettling about her. This was no ordinary old woman. She was a witch, the old witch smiled at Ella. A smile that sent chills down her spine. "Why are you crying, child?" the witch asked. Her voice soft, but full of something. Ella wiped her tears and looked at the witch, unsure if she should not speak. But the sadness in her heart made her talk. "No one buys my food," Ella whispered. "They still remember my mother and what happened to her. They think I am like her." The witch nodded slowly as if she already knew everything. "Ah, yes, your mother. Yemi, the villagers still fear her, don't they?" the witch said. Her voice, soft, but sharp. "But it's not just fear that keeps them away, child. Something is missing from your food." Ella blinked, looking confused. "What do you mean? I cooked the best food I can. Just like my mother." The witch smile widened her mouth, showing her crooked teeth. "It's not about how good it tastes," she said. "There's something you must add to your food to make the villagers come to you. Something special." Ella stared at the old woman, feeling uneasy. "What is it?" she asked. She wasn't even sure if she wanted to know the answer. The witch leaned in closer, her eyes gleaming in the dark. "Private hair," she whispered. "Put your private hair in the food," she said. Ella was startled. The old witch reached into her old tattered robe and pulled out a small calabash. Mix a little of this black substance into the food. With your public hair and see the magic. No, I can't. Ella replied fearfully. The witch laughed dry and cold laughter. Your mother said the same thing, child. And look what happened to her. Your mother. Yemi. She said. The villagers believed she poisoned that young man. Don't they? But the truth, child, is not what they think. The witch said. Ella looked at the witch confused. What do you mean? Everyone says my mother poisoned him. She said. The witch's smile faded and her eyes grew cold. Your mother didn't poison anyone. She said, her voice now serious. It was us, we the witches caused that man's death. She said. But why? I knew it was set up. I know my mother wouldn't hurt anyone. The witch stepped closer, her voice turning sharp. Your mother refused to join us. We asked her, we warned her. But she thought she could live her life without us. So we taught her a lesson. We killed that man and we made the villagers believed it was her fault. Ella's heart pounded in her chest. You killed him? Why did you do that? Ella asked. The witch's eyes gleamed in the dark. We needed her to understand. She thought she could cook and live peacefully without our power, but when she refused to do as we said, we had to show her the price of disobedience. And so, the villagers turned on her. And she paid with her life. Ella felt sick. Her mother had died. Not because she was guilty, but because she had stood against the witches. The unfairness of it all made Ella's stomach twists with anger and grief. You killed my mother, she whispered, her voice shaking. The witch laughed softly, a cruel sound that echoed in the night. Yes, child. And now it's your turn to decide. Will you follow in your mother's footsteps and refuse us? Or will you do what's necessary to survive? Ella's heart raced. She didn't want to believe the witch, but her words struck a deep fear in her. Was this why number one brought her food? Was this the secret to breaking the curse of her mother's past? She asked herself. The witch reached into her bosom and pulled out a small calabash. Like I said earlier, there is something missing from your food. Take this, she said, giving the calabash to her. If you want to sell your food, if you want the villagers to come to you, you must use your private hair to put in the food. And she added, with her voice growing darker, you must mix a little of this black substance into it. Ella's stomach turned with disgust. No, I can't do that. It's horrible, she cried. The witch's smile returned. This time, more menacing than before. Your mother thought the same thing, and look how that led to her death, at the hands of angry villagers. She placed the calabash into Ella's hands. If you refuse, child, you will face the same fate. Don't be a fool, like your mother. Ella stared at the small calabash, her hands trembling. The witch's words echoed in her mind. Was this her only chance to survive? To break free from the curse her mother had faced? The witch turned and began to walk away, her figure disappearing into the shadows. Think carefully, Ella, the witch said. Your life depends on it. Ella stood there alone in the darkness, the weight of the calabash heavy in her hands. Her mind raced with fear and uncertainty. Could she really do what the witch had said? Was it worth risking her life, to follow the same path her mother had refused? That night, Ella couldn't sleep. The witch's words echoed in her mind. Her mother had refused the witches, and it had cost her life. Ella didn't want to follow the same path, but the thought of doing something so terrible made her feel sick. She paced around her small room, looking at the calabash the witch had given her. Ella thought about her mother. Yemi had been a brave woman by standing up to the witches. But didn't that brought her a tragic death? Accused of a crime she didn't commit. And now, Ella stood at the same crossroads. She felt trapped with no good choices. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to creep through her window, Ella made her decision. She couldn't live like this anymore, with number one eating food, with the whispers of the villages haunting her every step. If taking the witch advice was the only way to survive, then she would do it. The next morning Ella went to her store as usual. She prepared the food, but this time she did something she never thought she would do. She took her private hair, just like the witch had said, and used it in the food. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to continue. Then she opened the calabash and sprinkled a tiny bit of the black substance into the pot. Her heart pounded. She finished cooking the food, hoping number one would ever find out what she had done. If anyone should find out, she will be filled with shame. But she pushed the feelings aside, determined to see what would happen when Ella opened her store that day. She was nervous. Would anyone come with the footage of what she had done? But to her surprise, something amazing happened. One by one, people began to approach her stall. At first, it was just a few curious villagers, and then more and more came. They asked for bowls of her food and Ella served them, watching in disbelief as they ate and smiled. "This food is so delicious," one man said. "I haven't tasted food this good in a long time." Another man added. The villagers who had once avoided her now couldn't get enough of her cooking. By the end of the day, Ella had sold everything. Her pots were empty and her store was surrounded by people talking about how good her food is. Quickly and soon, everyone in the village was talking about Ella's delicious meals. Ella couldn't believe it. For the first time, since she had returned to a Four village, she felt a glimmer of hope. The witch's strange advice had worked and Ella's store was busy with customers. She had done something she never imagined, but it had brought her success. At evening, Ella packed up her store. She thought about her choice. She didn't feel proud of what she had done. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel powerless. The villagers loved her food and she had finally found a way to survive. As time passed, Ella's food store grew more popular. What had started as a small operation is now the busiest spot in the entire village. People from nearby towns and villages began to travel to a Four just to taste Ella's famous cooking. Her food had become something special, everyone talked about it and people couldn't get enough. Within a year, Ella had become the most successful food seller. Not only in a Four, but in the surrounding areas as well. With all the money she made, she built herself a large, beautiful house, one of the finest in the village. It was so big that everyone who passed by would stop and stare. The house was built with strong walls and shiny windows, and it stood as a symbol of Ella's success. But, even as Ella's business grew, she never let anyone else cook the food. She hired many workers to help run her stall, serve the food and clean up. But the cooking was always done by her alone. She didn't want anyone else to know the secret behind her success. The strange and dark ritual kept the villagers coming back for more. While Ella's fame spread out, not everyone was happy. The women in the village whispered among themselves, jealous and suspicious. Why are the men always at her stall? They wondered why they are so interested in her food and in her too. Soon, rumors began to spread. People whispered that Ella had some kind of power over the men in the village. The women were convinced that something was wrong. She must be using magic, they said. How else could she rise to the top so quickly? How else could she make our husbands admire her so much? But Ella paid no attention to the gossip. She was focused on her business and the rumors didn't bother her. She had everything she had ever wanted: money, a beautiful home, and a thriving business. The whispers and jealousy of the village doesn't concern her, because whatever the village women say couldn't take her success away from her. Ella's success only grew larger. The more the people talked about her, the more her business thrived. She became the talk of every village around. And people came from even farther away just to taste her cooking. But deep inside, she knew the price she had paid for this fame she had. She followed the witch's advice. And while it brought her wealth, it also brought a shadow over her heart. No matter how much success she had, there was a part of Ella that still felt uneasy. She ignored it, pushing it to the back of her mind, but the feeling was always there. One evening, when she has closed from store and retired to her house, she was lost in thought, and all of a sudden, a chill air filled the room, the wind howled outside and the lights flickered. Before Ella could even get up to check, a familiar figure appeared in the corner of the room. It was the old witch. Ella's heart sank as she saw the witch's crooked smile and glowing eyes. It had been so long since she had last seen her, and though Ella had tried to forget, deep down, she knew the witch would return one day. Ella, the witch said in a voice that sends shivers down her spine. It's time. Time for what? Ella asked. She already feared the answer. The witch's smile widened. You didn't think your success would come without a price forever, did you? We've given you wealth, power, and fame. Now, it's time to pay us back. She swallowed hard. But I've done everything you asked. I followed your advice. Isn't that enough? Ella asked. The witch shook her head slowly. No, child, the small sacrifice you made was only the beginning. It's time for something bigger. Now, we need your womb. My womb? Ella asked. But why? For you to succeed and to hold on to everything you've gained. You must give up the chance to have children. You will never have a family of your own. That is the price you must pay to keep your fortune. The witch said. Ella's heart pounded. She had dreamed of having children one day. She already had the mind of starting a family and sharing her success with them. Her beautiful house felt so empty, and she had always hoped that one day it would be filled with the laughter of children. No, Ella said, shaking her head, I can't do that. I want children, I want a family. I've worked so hard for everything I have, but I don't want to give up my future for it. The witch's smile faded, replaced by a cold stare. You think you can refuse us, Ella? Do you think you can walk away from the bargain we made? If you don't give us your womb, you will lose everything. Your wealth, your fame, your house. It will all be gone. Ella's hands tremble. The thought of losing everything terrified her, but the idea of giving up the chance to be a mother was even worse. No, she said again, her voice stronger this time. I won't do it. I'll find another way. The witch's face twisted with anger. There is no other way, Ella. She hissed. If you don't pay the price, you will face the consequences, and they will be far worse than anything you can imagine. Ella listened to her heart racing, but her mind was made up. I won't give you my womb, I'll take whatever comes, but I won't give up my future for this. Why didn't you tell me this in the beginning? She asked angrily. Very well, the witch said, her voice loud and sharp. You've made your choice. But remember, Ella, everything has a price, and yours will be paid in full. With that, the witch disappeared, leaving Ella alone in the dark. Her heart pounding with fear of what was to come. The morning after the witch's visit, a strange wind blew through the village of Afor. The breeze was unlike anything the villagers had ever felt. Cold and sharp, it whipped through the streets, rattling windows and shaking doors. But something even stranger happened at Ella's house. The wind had caused damage to her secret room. The room where she kept her cooking supplies and performed the dark ritual. The witch had opened the place wide enough that even a passerby can see through it. Everyone was surprised at which the breeze did its thing. Most women who were curious about Ella's sudden rise to fame noticed the gap in her house. One of the most curious women, whom her husband stopped eating her food because of Ella, saw this as a chance she couldn't resist. She crouched down and looked through the hole. What she saw shocked her to the core. Inside Ella's secret room, she was preparing her food just as she did every day, but the woman watched in horror as Ella took her private hair and mixed it into the food. She also saw Ella sprinkled the mysterious black substance from the small calabash the witch had given her. The woman gasped and stumbled back from the hole, her heart racing. This is witchcraft, she whispered to herself, horrified by what she had seen. Without wasting another moment, she ran to tell the other villagers. It didn't take long for the news to spread like wildfire. The villagers, filled with anger and fear, gathered at Ella's house. They dragged her out to the village square demanding answers. Crowd grew larger and their voices became louder, full of rage and betrayal. Hear me out, Ella cried out. The village elders stepped forward and asked her to explain. Is it true, Ella? One elder asked. Have you been using witchcraft in your cooking? First, Ella wanted to deny it and protect herself, but the weight of everything, the guilt, the fear, and the witch's curse pressed down on her. She couldn't lie anymore. With tears in her eyes, Ella nodded and confessed everything. She told them about the witch, the private hair, the black substance, and how she had followed the witch's instructions to become successful. The villagers were shocked. They had trusted Ella, admired her, and now they felt betrayed. The anger grew and some of them shouted for Ella to be punished. The village elders summoned the oracle to decide Ella's fate. The oracle, ancient and wise woman, arrived at the village square, looked at Ella with a stern face, and after listening to the villagers, she gave Ella two choices. "You have done greatly, Ella," the oracle said. "You can either sacrifice your womb to the witches as they demand, or you will face death for your crimes. The choice is yours." Ella's heart sank. She had already refused the witches' demand for her womb, but now the threat of death loomed over her. The thought of losing her life terrified her. And she realized she wasn't ready to die. "I choose life," Ella whispered, her voice barely audible. "You will live, but you are forbidden from ever selling food in this village again. You will leave this place and you will never return." The villagers murmured among themselves. Some are relieved, while the ones that are still angry are so, because Ella was not sentenced to death. They felt utterly defeated. Ella gathered the little she had and left the village. She didn't look back as she walked away from the place where her mother had died. The place where she had once hoped to rebuild her life. Her dream had turned into a nightmare, and now she had lost everything. The tale of Ella was told for years in a Afar village, a warning to all. Those who heard it remembered how greed and revenge had led to Ella's downfall, and they spoke of how chasing success at any cost could destroy even the brightest of lives. Ella was never seen in the village again. I hope you enjoyed the story. So, like the video, comment what you learned from the story and subscribe.